subject that we're going to look at tonight will involve an insight into the pathway of Yitro, the father-in-law of Moshe, the first Jew by choice. So our Parsha begins with chapter 18. I hope you have it in front of you. Vayishma Yisro Chayin Midyan Chosein Moshe. Yisro heard what Hashem had done to redeem the Jewish people, taking them out of Mitzrayim. And of course, as I just mentioned, Yisro becomes the paradigm of the Jew by choice, the person who is not part of the Jewish nation, who comes to join the Jewish people. And makes a valuable contribution, as we'll hopefully have a chance to discuss a little bit later as well, to the betterment of the Jewish people. He has some advice which is embraced. But I'd like to share with you an approach that the Rabbi Yonatan Eibeschutz suggests regarding how could it be that they accepted him as a candidate for conversion, as we might say nowadays. He should be disqualified, not him because of his personal circumstances, but rather the whole proposal of accepting converts at that time should have been off the agenda. Why so? Because the Gemara says, Ein mekablin gerim b'yimei Shlomo HaMelech. In the days of King Solomon, they did not accept converts. And the reason is that in the days of Shlomo HaMelech, the Jewish people were prominent, were distinguished, were living in peace, in affluence, under a renowned and benevolent kingdom of King Solomon. And for that reason, it would be very natural to imagine that people might like to become Jewish because of the benefits associated with it, because of the prestige, because of the affluence and all of that. So for that reason, they wouldn't accept them because the presumption of ulterior motive was too prominent. So the Gemara says, though, that the daughter of Paro, not the one from our Parshas, our book of Exodus, but rather hundreds of years later in the days of King Solomon, so Shlomo HaMelech famously or maybe infamously entered into a political alliance or an alliance to the form of marriage by marrying the daughter of Paro. And she converted to Judaism and she married Shlomo. Now, the truth is, he did that with a number of kings and it didn't end well. Those wives, although they did convert to Judaism, their conversion was perhaps less than completely altruistic, and even if it was, perhaps the lure or the influence or the habits of their earlier lives did become dominant in their own lives once again. And we read in the book of Kings how actually they reverted to idolatrous ways. It did not end well. But nevertheless, how could he convert her in the first place? We just said that they're not allowed to accept Gerim. So the Rambam says maybe they should not have, but they did anyway. And the Diavad, after the fact, they were able to recognize, that is to say, validate their conversion. Rabbi Yonatan Eibeschutz says another idea, though. He says the reason that the daughter of Paro was allowed to convert is that she's the princess. She doesn't need to join the Jewish people for prominence, prestige, glamour, affluence, and the rest of it. She was the princess, so therefore she would not be suspected of looking to better her station in life by becoming Jewish. And that's why Shlomo was prepared to accept the daughter of Paro for that reason. It's a bit like Ivanka Trump marrying Jared Kushner. I don't want to take the analogy too far, but there may be something along those lines. That's the analogy that came to my mind when I was learning this. How does that relate to Yisro? So he says, the days of Moshe Rabbeinu surely would be subject to the same concern as the days of King Solomon. The Jewish people at that time were riding high. They had left Egypt finally after all the persecution, etc., with great wealth, with great they were on a roll. God took them out with dramatic demonstrations of love for the Jewish people. They were riding high, just like the Erev Rav joined them, who were also not a blessing to the Jewish people necessarily, but they were opportunistic. So by the same token, anyone else who wants to join the Jewish people should have been rebuffed because it's just rank opportunism. So that's why he said that the Torah tells us who was this Yitro, which you already know, but the Torah repeats it here because he was the father-in-law of Moshe. So since he's the father-in-law of Moshe, not that he has protexia, but because he's the father-in-law of Moshe, he doesn't need to become Jewish to enjoy the prestige and the admiration. He has Jewish grandchildren already. He has all of the sort of trappings, all of the benefits of being Jewish, he already has because of his role as the father-in-law of Moshe Rabbeinu. So therefore, the fact that he wanted to actually become Jewish and accept upon himself the yoke of heaven, that surely demonstrates his sincere conviction. Because just like we said about the daughter of Paro, who didn't need to become Jewish in order to enjoy the prestige because she had plenty of it as the princess. So in a similar way, Yitro, even more so, would not have to become Jewish to enjoy those benefits. The fact that he wanted to do so is a testament to his sincerity, and that's why he was accepted. And that's why, as we said, he is the example, maybe even the paradigm of the Jew by choice. Now, Rabbi Yonatan Eibeschutz has a very elegant, slightly complex drash, which I'm excited about sharing with you. He says the following. There is a famous passage in the Gemara in that, trying to find it here in my copy of Rabbi Yonatan Eibeschutz commentary. It says that the Gemara records that what did he hear? What did Yisro hear that prompted him to come? Rashi mentions it as well. Kriyas Yamsuf u'Milchemas Amalek, the splitting of the sea and the war with Amalek. What's so consequential about the war with Amalek? The Torah says Amalek attacked them. Yahushua successfully rebuffed the attack, defeated Amalek, and that's all. It's only about I think 9 psukim altogether that narrate this event. What was so like dramatic about it, certainly compared to the 10 plagues and the splitting of the sea, which is mentioned, but what about the other events? In any case, that's what the Gemara says, that Milchemas Amalek somehow prompted him to come and join the Jewish people. So here's the drash of Rabbi Yonatan Eibeschutz. There's a famous Gemara, this is what I wanted to mention, the famous Gemara in Sanhedrin that says that when Paro was, had his brainwave at the very beginning of the book of Exodus, Hava nischach malo, let's deal cunningly, shrewdly with the Jewish people. They're becoming too numerous. How shall we act against them to neutralize them or even to exploit them so they won't be a threat to us, but on the contrary, they will be an asset that we can exploit. That was Paro's idea. And of course, he implemented it to subjugate them, to enslave them. Says the Gemara, there were 3 counselors with whom Paro consulted. One of them was Bilam, and he said, great idea, go for it. Oppress them, persecute them, enslave them, exploit them. There was Eov. Eov was silent. And Yitro was the 3rd advisor, and Yitro fled. He didn't want to be part of that discussion, so he checked out, he fled, and that's why Moshe met him years and years later, a long time later, when he rocked up in Midian by the well. Okay, how old Yitro was, that doesn't detain us right now. The rabbis often merge lifespans or extend them in accordance with the purpose of the drash. So we won't be detained by that. Eov, we don't have a problem how long he lived because we don't know when he lived anyway. There are different opinions about that. At any rate, this is what the Gemara says. So Bilam, who encouraged this plan, he ultimately died by the sword. He was killed towards the end of the book of Bamidbar, as the Torah describes. Eov, because he said nothing, so he was afflicted with pain and suffering. Ultimately, his life was restored, but as we know, the book of Job tells us all about that. And Yitro, because he fled and he didn't want to be part of that discussion altogether. So he was rewarded. Moshe became his son-in-law. He came to join the Jewish people. His descendants ultimately lived among the Jewish people and maybe joined the Jewish people in that sense. Okay. So says the Gemara. Says Rabbi Eibeschutz, why did Yitro flee? Why didn't he advise Paro, don't do it, it's immoral, it's going to end badly for you anyway, eventually, so it's not the right thing to do. Why didn't Yitro contradict or refute the suggestion of Paro? Actually, after all, he's an advisor, his counsel was sought. So the simple answer, of course, what we all assume is that he was afraid. He could tell that Paro had his own ideas here, and he was just looking for a yes man, and therefore Yitro fled. But Rosh Hashanah says this is dachuk, this is not convincing. It's the nature of someone who asks for advice to be prepared to at least hear the advice. He may not follow it. He can take a survey and decide a second opinion, a third opinion, which advice to follow. But it's not logical to say that Paro would have punished Yitro for expressing an opinion when Paro had solicited his opinion. So why indeed did he flee for that matter? He says the following, very, I think, clever. He says that Yitro was an advisor to Paro, but Yitro was also aware of the prophecy to Abraham. Hashem told Abraham, Yadoa Teda, Tidger Yezarecha Be'eretz Lo Lahem, V'avdum V'ino Samabam Shana. You should know that your descendants will be strangers in a foreign land. They will be enslaved. They will be afflicted. So Yisro thought, I can see where this is heading. I can see that Paro has an idea in his mind, and that is he's determined to carry out that idea. Moreover, it's consistent with the prophecy to Abraham that the descendants of Abraham will be afflicted. This is beginning to come to pass. This is the beginning of the process. I can't turn it back. It's the fulfillment of the divine prophecy. The problem is, and this is the insight of Yonatan, I think it's so clever. The problem is that Yisro is from Midian, and Midian is the son of Abraham Avinu from Keturah. So Midian and Yisro, as a descendant of Midian, is also a descendant of Abraham Avinu. So this prophecy that Abraham's descendants are going to be persecuted, Yitro thought, hey, I'm part of that as well. If Abraham's descendants are going to be enslaved and tortured, I'm out of here. I want to avoid that fate. And so he did. That's why he fled, because he felt that the axe would fall on him eventually, and therefore he fled. Okay, so he fled. Very fine. So he escaped. This, however, is the problem is, from Yisro's point of view, is that the Jewish people were redeemed from Mitzrayim eventually, and they're on the way to the land of Israel. What Yisro didn't appreciate, what he did not realize, is that the Jewish people were only able to inherit the land of Israel because they had paid the price of the Shibud Mitzrayim. Like the economists say, there's no free lunch. The Jewish people paid the price of the Shibud in Mitzrayim, and therefore they were, so to speak, entitled to the realization of the prophecy and the promise to Abraham Avinu that they will leave Rechush Gadol and they will realize the prophecy of inheriting the land of Israel. And this is why Bilam, when he gave his oracle later on in Bamidbar, so towards the end of Parshas Balak, Bilam, having been unable to curse the Jews, turns to Balak and he says, let me tell you about the future, what these people will do to you in the future. And he says, Vayars ha-Keni, vayamai, and he spoke about the Keni. The Keni are the descendants of Yisro. And it says, Eitan moshavecha, v'sim b'selakinecha. Says Rashi over there in Bamidbar, in Parshas Balak, Bilam was surprised. How can it be that Yisro and the descendants of Yisro are dwelling in the land of Israel? How can it be the Jewish people are the ones who inherited the land of Israel because they paid the price of the shibud, of the persecution in Mitzrayim? And the Gemara says, and one Sanhedrin says, that that Abraham, that Bilam said to Yisro, "How can it be that your descendants are in the land of Israel? You were with me in that discussion all of those years ago with Paro, and so how are you rewarded in this way? You were part of that plot." Says Rabbi and Eibeschutz, the Gemara is hard to understand. Of course, he was part of the plot in the sense that he was present at the meeting, but he ran away. He did not. He was not a party to the plan. On the contrary, he absented himself in order to avoid to be complicit in that terrible plot. The explanation is, though, that what Bilam meant was, according to Rabbi Eibeschutz, what he meant was that the Jewish people paid the price. Therefore, they live in the land of Israel. How about you? So Rabbi Eibeschutz explains as follows: Yisro thought the Jewish people are inheriting the land of Israel primarily for one reason: the promise to Abraham. So if it's a promise of Abraham, this is a promise to the descendants of Abraham, so I'm also a descendant of Abraham. What he didn't realize, though, is that it's not enough to be a descendant of Abraham, because when he looked at Amalek, Amalek came and attacked the Jewish people. This is the answer to what we began with a few minutes ago. What is the significance of him hearing about the war with Amalek? He heard about the war with Amalek. Amalek came to attack the Jewish people. Amalek is not just a descendant of Abraham and Keturah like Yisro himself was. He's a descendant of Abraham and Sarah. Amalek, is a descendant of Yitzchak and Rivka. He's got great yichus as far as that goes. Okay, he's a descendant of Esav, but it's still the case that he's from Abraham and Sarah, and he's from Yitzchak and Rivka. He's got good yichus. It still didn't help. Firstly, he was wicked, and secondly, he was defeated in battle. Yehoshua clobbered him. He just about survived Amalek. Amalek did survive, but Amalek was defeated in battle. So that alerted Yisro to the fact that to be a descendant of Abraham is not enough. Even Abraham and Yitzchak is not enough, because you could still be as wicked as Amalek, and you could be defeated in battle. Therefore, Yisro realized that I have got to join the Jewish people. I've got to join Yaakov. Or to put it differently, it's not enough to have distinguished yichus, distinguished antecedents. It's a person's own merit, zechus atzmo, which is essential, more essential. So Yisro realized that here is Amalek. He's also got yichus, better than my yichus in terms of Abraham, Yitzchak, and still Amalek lost out. Therefore, Yisro came to join the Jewish people, to be part of Klal Yisrael, to be part of the destiny of Klal Yisrael. And that's how he or his descendants inherited to be living among the Jewish people. According to Rashi, they were Tamil Chachamim as well. And this is why Yisro came as a result of hearing about Milchemes Amalek. And this is how he came to join the Jewish people. And that's why he fled, again, from the original council meeting to discuss Paro's plan, because he did not want to be subjugated as a descendant of Abraham. Ultimately, as I said, he realized that it's up to him. It's up to his own merit, if he has the merit. Someone once said that Yichus, distinguished pedigree, is like a line of zeros, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros. A lot of zeros amount to nothing, unless you put the number 1 at the beginning. If you are the 1 before the line of zeros, that's a large number. But if you have only the line of zeros, it amounts to nothing at all. So Yisro wanted to be the 1, to be sort of to augment his yichus, and as I say, he is remembered even to this day as the paradigm, certainly the first example of the Jew by choice. Okay, I want to share with you Rabbi Yonatan Eibeschutz approach to the advice of Yisro. So this is a fascinating passage. Actually, it occupies quite a large proportion of the Parasha of Yisro, which of course I didn't say, but of course everyone knows it's dominated by receiving the Torah, Matan Torah, the Ten Commandments. So it's got very, very fundamental aspects of uh, the history of the Jewish people are found in our parsha. But a lot of the parsha actually is taken up with Yisro's arrival and with Yisro's advice. So if you turn a bit further, I'm looking at um, chapter 18, verse 18. So, or 17 even. Vayomar Chosein Moshe Elav Lo Tova Devar She'ata Oseh. It's not good what you're doing. He sees that Moshe is busy judging the people. And it says maybe Macharas, maybe it's Macharas Yom Kippur, Rashi says, but at any rate, some time after the arrival of Yisro, he observes Moshe's program, and he feels that Moshe, his distinguished son-in-law, is overworked. And he says to him in chapter 18, verse 18, Yudches, Yudches, Navol tibol gamata gam ha'am hazeh asher imach. You will become worn out. You can't cope. Not just you, but also the people. It's too difficult. You can't do it on your own. Atashma b'koli, listen to my voice. I will give you some advice. May God be with you. You should be on behalf of the people opposite God. In other words, you will, so to speak, be God's representative to the Jewish people. And you will bring the difficult questions to God. Okay, so far there's no great novelty in it. Of course, his novelty is create a judiciary. You don't have to be the one to judge the entire nation of Israel. Rather, you will be at the top of the hierarchy, the top of the judiciary, but you'll create a system. You'll have those who are in charge of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. And I hope that in the next 10 minutes that we have together, we'll be able to see some insights into the particulars of this piece of advice. But first, let's understand why he says, Navol tibo gam ata gam ha'am. Now, the truth is, that expression, gam ata gam ha'am, in biblical Hebrew, it's a common formula. In modern Hebrew, we would say ata v'ha'am, or we could say ata v'gam ha'am. But in classical biblical Hebrew, it's common to say gam ata gam ha'am. Nevertheless, the repetition of the gam sort of hints to the possibility that there's some novelty in this. Because at the simple understanding, his concern is for Moshe. Moshe will be worn out. He will be unable to cope with the workload and the backlog with his other duties and other responsibilities if he's judging from morning till night. But he says it's not fair to the people either. So the simple understanding is not fair to the people because it will take too long. Since you're the only judge, so every case that comes before you, you've got to listen to, and everyone else is waiting for the longest time. Says Yonatan Eibeschutz something much more profound. He says, you and the people, you're both going to lose out. How so? Because the halacha is that a judge may not, even a prophet, let's say, may not render a judgment based on prophecy, based on Ruach HaKodesh. In fact, the Gemara, he quotes in one Rosh Hashanah that Shlomo HaMelech wanted to judge without the benefit of witnesses or warning to the witnesses, but to use Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration. He thought that's going to be more efficient, also ultimately more accurate. What can be better than divine inspiration? That was King Solomon's idea. Bas Kol, a heavenly voice rang out and said, Yosher divrei emes shetzrichen ladun din emes la'amito. One has to judge in accordance with the law of the Torah. The way to judge is in accordance with the law of the Torah. There must be witnesses, there must be warning, there must be certain guidelines about who has to pay whom, who is liable in what kind of situation, spelled out in the Torah in terms of, as I said, liability and other considerations in terms of logic, in terms of what is considered a reasonable or unreasonable presumption. Of course, if you have prophecy, you can do away with so much of that, but that's not the law of the Torah. The Torah is to judge in accordance with those laws. If that's the case, actually, Moshe has a problem, because what happens if you have a claimant and a defendant, and the claimant alleges that a certain event happened and the defendant denies it, and there are no witnesses. But Moshe, with his prophetic insight, knows that the event did happen, whether it's a theft or borrowing or deposit, whatever it might be. So Moshe is in a quandary. If he rules in accordance with the claimant because he knows the claimant is in the right, then it's against the law of the Torah because there are no witnesses. And if he rules in accordance with the fact that there are no witnesses and he sends the claimant home empty-handed, then Moshe knows that this is not a truthful judgment because in actuality the claimant is in the right. So Moshe is snookered because what can he do? And as a result, he'll have to wait for more witnesses to come or for some witnesses or any witnesses, and time will pass. The judgment may never be handed down. It's going to be distressing and unfair to the litigants as well and to the whole nation. So he says, this is why it says, Gamata Gam Ha'am. Moshe, you'll be in a quandary because you won't be able to hand down a ruling because of the conflict between what you know, Baruch HaKodesh, and the law of the Torah in accordance with the evidence which is actually available to the court. Then he says another possibility as well, which is a bit related, but it's not identical. He says, we have an interesting statement in the Talmud, Lo charav Yerushalayim ela she'emidu dinehem al din Torah. Jerusalem was destroyed because they conducted their commercial or their interpersonal affairs in accordance with the law of the Torah. Now this sounds totally counterintuitive. He should have said Jerusalem was destroyed because they did not act according to the Torah. The explanation is that they were litigious. They insisted on taking one another to court, pressing charges all the time for any infraction, perceived or genuine, however modest, however unintentional, however inadvertent. There was no chesed. There was not the sense of vitur, of overlooking a slight or something like that. It was that spirit of greed and that spirit of an unwillingness to share or to, as I say, overlook any kind of perceived slight that created an atmosphere of anger and tension and disunity, which ultimately brought about the Churban and the exile. That's what the Gemara says. Because of that, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, mitzvah litzoa. It is a mitzvah to find a compromise position. And actually, this is the halacha according to the Shulchan Aruch in Choshen Mishpat, that it's preferable for the judge to seek to impose or to promote a compromise rather than an outright judgment. In fact, when the litigants first come, the judge should say, do you want din or do you want pshara? And he, the judge, the dayan, should encourage them to go for the pshara option, for the compromise option. And we see why, as we mentioned a moment ago, that Shemidu Divra al-Din Torah, that it creates too much rigidity, too much harshness, too much demand. People are demanding of one another, and they're unwilling to give any to compromise and unwilling to yield. Very bad. The problem is the halacha states that the dayan can encourage pshara, compromise, only until he knows where the judgment is going. If he listens to the case and he listens to the witnesses and the evidence, the documentation, and even though the case has not yet been concluded in terms of all of the evidence, etc., but he can already sense or he feels confident which way the judgment is going, he cannot impose a pshara, because then he has a duty to hand down the judgment in accordance with the halachic parameters. It's only at the very beginning when they first come in, then he can say, look, can I suggest that this dispute should be mediated, that I will serve as a mediator and we'll look for the way to strike a compromise position. It doesn't mean he won't listen to the proof and the evidence, the testimony, but if he advances that suggestion and they accept it, then he can go down that route. Problem with Moshe Rabbeinu is because of his Ruach HaKodesh, two people come in, and as soon as they open their mouths, he can already tell who is in the right, who is in the wrong, and sometimes there may be some of each. I mean, it's not just a sum zero interaction or possibility, but Moshe, because of his Ruach HaKodesh, so he already has that intuitive clarity as to know what the ultimate judgment should be. And if that's the case, he cannot propose pshara, compromise, which by its nature is going to be imprecise and is going to therefore advantage one or the other in a way which is contrary to the accurate and precise halachic outcome as it should be. So it says, Yonatan Eibeschutz, these are two possibilities. Why? And of course, if that's the case, then it's not good for the people. That's why it says, if you look in the pasuk, it says, Ki kaved in Yudches, verse 18, Ki kaved mimcha hadavar, the matter is too heavy for you, too weighty for you. It says, Yonatan Eibeschutz, according to this interpretation, Yisro is saying to Moshe, the problem is because of you. You're the problem. You're the problem because of your gift of Ruach HaKodesh. You're not able, you're not allowed to propose a compromise. And of course, that creates tension, resentment, anger, desire for vengeance, but not against Moshe necessarily, but among the people, etc. So that's Ki kaved mimcha davar. The problem is because of you. You are the source of the problem. So what's the solution? So his solution is, as we said, the judiciary. Yonatan Eibeschutz, following along on from what we just said now, explains as follows. The nub of the problem, according to this, the nub of the problem is Moshe's greatest gift, namely prophecy, divine inspiration. He's got a direct line to Hashem all the time. He doesn't have to go into a trance or wait for a dream or do something to invoke the divine spirit. B'chol beis yineh manhu. Excuse me, as the Torah says later on in the end of the Haloscha, Moshe is in constant communication, constant contact. He's got the broadband wherever he goes. He's got a connectivity that's unfailing. That is the problem. So it says, Yonatan Eibeschutz, the only solution, therefore, is that when Moshe sits down to judge, the Ruach HaKodesh will have to leave him. The Shechina yistalek mimenu. If the Shechina leaves him, then he's like any other great Torah scholar, perhaps the greatest of scholar ever. But he won't necessarily have Ruach HaKodesh if Hashem turns off the broadband, the connection at that time. Problem is, Moshe, you're going to lose out. So that's why it beautifully fits into the Lashon. Ata, look at verse 19. Ata shema b'koli, listen to my voice. Yatzecha, will give you some advice. Vayhi Elokim imach, and God will be with you. According to my advice, it won't be necessary for you to sustain the loss of connectivity, the loss of the divine communication. In order to sit down and act as a judge, you won't have that need, because you won't be the judge on every case that the Jewish people come up with. You'll have a judiciary. That's why God will remain with you all the time, like he is normally. It won't be necessary for the Shekhinah to leave you at the time of the judgment. And if Moshe is judging from morning till night, it means you won't have the Shekhinah. That's what he said. I know we're slightly into overtime already, but I just want to end with a final beautiful drash, which I like very much. It says, Vayhi Elokim imach, and the pasuk continues, Hayei ata la'am mul ha'elokim. You will be for the people opposite God. In other words, you will be God's representative, as of course Moshe is within the Jewish people. But you, according to my system, will only have to involve yourself in a case which the lower courts have found too onerous or too complex or too difficult to adjudge. They will approach you, and you will then turn to God if need be for the clarification. That is the simple meaning. It says Yonatan Eibeschutz, quoting the Zohar, he says this idea about Tamul HaElokim, this alludes to the name of God, which we call the Shem Adoni. Now, you may know the name of Hashem, which is Elokim, refers to God of justice. That is to say, din, judgment. The name of God, the Tetragrammaton, is God's midas harachamim, of mercy. but Elohim is minas hadin. There's another name of God though, which we call the Shem Adini. It's spelled Aleph Dalet Nun Yud. We pronounce it the same way that we pronounce the Tetragrammaton, and its meaning, however, is different because the Shem Adini has embedded within it, hope you're following, the letters Dalet Nun. Adini Aleph Dalet Nun Yud. We pronounce it Adonai. You've got the Dalet and the Nun, which is Dan. Of course, that is Din. So that name of Hashem, although we pronounce it the same as the Tetragrammaton, Yud and Hey Vav and Hey, but we pronounce it the way it is written, which refers to Hashem, who is the judge. Says Rabbi Eibeschutz, a beautiful drash. Adoni is, we just said, Aleph Dalet Nun Yud. So when in Pasuk Chaf Aleph, it says, who should you choose? You need a whole judiciary to work with you. So he says, you will choose Sarei Alafim. Alafim is the Aleph. Alafim, Aleph. With Aleph, of course. Aleph is Aleph. So Sarei Meo, so Mea, how do you say Mea in, how do you express it in Gematria? So the letter Kuf. Mea is Kuf. So here's a bit of a drash. It's only a remnants for that reason. But you have Atbash. I hope you're with me. The Atbash Gematria system assigns or transposes an Aleph takes the place of a Taf, and the base takes the place of a Shin. So whereas Aleph is 1 in Gematria, but if you transpose it with a Taf, it's 400. So Kuf is 100 is Kuf, but the Kuf can be transposed with Dalet. It's Atbash Gar Dak, Dalet and Kuf. So Meya, which is Kuf, is a remiss to the Dalet. Of course, Chamishim, Sarei Chamishim, heads of officers of 50s, 50 is Nun, that you know. And Yud, the Sarei Asarot, 10 is Yud. So you have the Aleph, Dalet to Adbash, Nun and Yud. So the whole judiciary alludes to the idea that their function is to be Mul HaElokim. They're going to be opposite God. They're going to be the counterpart to Hashem. Hashem is in Shamayim, but they are going to do their very best to ensure judgment and justice on earth. But it's going to be justice that is accomplished through human ability, human fallibility, it has to be said, but the agency and the effort and the parameters of the Torah appointing judges who fulfill the requirements, which Yitro also describes, and in this way, Benasui Tach, Moshe will have the assistance. So just to sum up, what we've seen tonight is a few, I think, quite always creative, always imaginative, always original approaches. We've seen that Yisro was able to convert even in that time when one might think anybody wants to join the winner, of course. But Yisro, as the father-in-law of Moshe, did not need to convert to join the Jewish people to have all of the kudos, all of the accolades, and all of the honor and the prestige. He was Moshe's father-in-law. So just like Shlomo could marry the princess, and the princess was not dazzled by the wealth of the Jewish people because she came from the palace anyway. So in a similar way, Yisro did not need to convert in order to enjoy the trappings of the association with Moshe. The fact that he never wanted to do so is why he was accepted. We learned in this extended drash that Yisro was part of the council that from whom Paro sought advice, but he fled. The reason he fled is that he knew that Paro was in the process, the beginning stages of carrying out that prophecy that Avram's descendants would be persecuted. He didn't want to be part of the persecution, but then he realized that it's not enough to be descended from Abraham. You've got to be your own righteous person as well. Look at Amalek. He's descended from Abraham and Yitzhak. It didn't help him. He was a Rasha, and he got what was coming to him. Therefore, Yisro realized he needs to join the Jewish people, and so he did, and so he did his descendants as well. And finally, we learned about Navo Tibol, that you will be worn out, you and the people. Moshe, you'll be worn out because your very gift of prophecy means you can't effectively be a judge for the reason that we explained. And then finally, we saw this, I think, very clever drash about the thousands, the hundreds, the 50s, and the 10s, alluding to Shem Adoni, the name of Hashem, which refers to justice and judgment. Thank you very much. I wish everyone a wonderful Shabbos. I hope that you're going to show, if you feel able to do so, regarding the pathogens. And we hear the reading of the Torah, including Matan Torah. So we've got a lot to look forward to. I wish everybody Shabbat Shalom.